Take it easy. Take it easy.
All right, everybody, welcome in to the Easy Approach. As always, I am Nate, and today I'm joined by Tony Zuma.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here. And Kanan is joining us once more. Kanan Evans. Thank you for joining us, man.
Please don't use my last name. I don't want people knowing that I'm here.
No association.
Yeah, I try to keep it anonymous.
Yeah, yep.
Especially
not
with
associated
today's
with the-
topic, right?
the
You don't
Evans.
want to have a stigma attached to you.
Well, it
That's
won't matter. It won't matter here soon. So,
And that's a great way of talking about what we're talking about, which is the world is ending tomorrow.
what they're saying.
In case you haven't heard, which I really did not hear. So,
Yeah, yes. The topic of today's episode is, what if the end of the world isn't really about the end of the world? I hope I don't have to go back and re-record that, because sometimes the title changes later. But that's our clever way, or, clever in quotation marks way, of introducing the topic, which is the end times. And we felt like it was a really appropriate time to talk about the end times, because I've heard from multiple different arenas. Tony hadn't heard, but Kanan and I have both heard that there's a whole lot of buzz that in the Christian evangelical space that Jesus is coming back Tuesday, September 23rd. I don't know if there's a specific time attached to that, but that's the day. And there's like Feast of Trumpets type stuff, and there's Old Testament prophecy, and there's some Daniel, and there's some Revelation stuff that people have tied into here, and like the rapture's happening, or Jesus is returning, or something along those lines is happening tomorrow. So normally we release every other week on Friday. The plan here is to rush this release forward, and we joked before recording this we should record one episode for, okay, the world has ended, now what do we do? And then we should record a second episode, okay, the world didn't end, now what do we do? Just so we've got all our bases covered. We're totally prepared for all eventualities. But I'll just put it this way: we're recording on a Monday, and tomorrow the world is supposedly going to end. So if you are listening to this on Friday, we're all still here, or most of us are still here.
A message to the ones who are not, who are still here.
Right.
Like, sorry, guys. We can't record any more podcasts for you.
Yeah.
But here's a message of encouragement.
Yep. So there's the elephant in the room. There's a ton of buzz online in Christian circles about Jesus returning this week. I don't actually know 1,000% if it's the 23rd. I've heard that one, but I've also heard people say maybe it'll be on the 22nd, which is like right now. Maybe it'll be on the 21st, the 4th. But that specific prediction is not exactly what we're here to talk about. But it is a great occasion for some bigger and more interesting questions, I think. So I want to ask you guys this. What is your gut reaction when you hear buzz like that about like specific date setting kind of buzz? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel curious? Are you skeptical? What's your gut check reaction when you hear like the world is going to end on such and such date at such and such time?
oh man, my gut. I'll say it as respectfully as I can, because there's even within Christian circles, and if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, I encourage that. I definitely love as many people to be a part of this conversation as possible. But I definitely align with the skeptic, big time when it comes to this topic. Right away, especially if I hear something that's super trendy in Christian circles or super popular from this super charismatic guy, I start thinking to myself, oh, this is why people don't like Christians, because we're like a cult. Yeah, they see cult. They don't see Christianity. They see a bunch of fluff that can easily manipulate people for whatever reason. That's where I tend to go to.
Yeah. Are you sure? Are you sure you're not just a contrarian?
Yeah. honestly, that's probably him. I probably
If
am.
it's popular, I don't like it.
No, it's kind of funny. I think it's a very interesting premise in and of itself. Like, what expectations do you set onto things that are popular or accepted by society, you know? And I don't know, especially if you like look at my hobbies and the things that I actually do enjoy, I feel like I'm opposite of a contrarian sometimes. Like sometimes I can fanboy things, you know? And so the fact that even the person who tends to fanboy his hobbies is no, this is a bunch of BS. I try I
Yeah.
try I try to be as respectful as I can be, like I said. If it happens tomorrow, by all means, I will be more than happy to be wrong here. That would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you.
I would say my gut reaction in the past has been very much in line with you, Tony. I would say I would mostly be like a eyes rolling sort of okay, here we go, let it out. Let your crazy out for a minute. I think actually in more recent past, I'm more interested. I still have a very healthy level of like skepticism, but not in sort of a negative way. I'm more like, okay, well, yeah, tell me more. Tell me more. I want to know, because at least our church, which I love our church, has talked a lot about this in recent past and talks about some of the prophecy and things like that, things that have a much looser understanding of. But as I've gotten older, maybe I've let a little bit of the crazy in. It's real possible.
Yeah.
So, but I'm interested. I'm interested to see where this conversation goes, and I'm definitely interested to see if there's a blinding flash of light coming from the east tomorrow at about noon,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll just have
Oh,
to see what
Trumpets and
happens.
all,
is that the
right?
time frame? About noon. Okay. I'll
I
be
don't know. I don't know. I just made it
I'll
up,
be
but
Well,
ready.
I just want to say, Cannon, I don't think that you let some of the crazy in over the years. It's always been there, bro.
Yeah,
It's always
latent.
fair enough.
It's like a
Fair enough.
like a cancer in the bones. It just came out as you got a little
Yeah,
older.
it was always there. I just hadn't fed it.
Yeah. I think my gut reaction gut reaction, just to be clear, I think we're going to do an episode about this as well. Like, when is your gut a liar? Like, when should you just not trust your gut at all? And I think often my gut reaction is wrong. So just preface it by saying that.
Mm,
But I think my gut reaction is to be not just skeptical, but cynical. I think I immediately default to cynicism. Um, and maybe it's because I grew up in that kind of environment where so much of that was like there was so much hype around Jesus is coming this time. Okay, it didn't happen. Okay, he's coming this time. Oh, all right, didn't happen. Okay, he's coming this time. And then going back and reading through history, how that same sentiment has been like like a cyclical, routine where in every generation people are like, it's going to happen in this time and in this date, and so far it hasn't, right?
yeah,
So I think
nothing new.
yeah. So yeah, it's nothing new, and so I default to cynicism. I don't think that's the healthiest thing. Um, but I think also part of it is it feels like it's a fluffy sensationalist substitute for actually following in the footsteps of Jesus, which is what I believe Christianity is really about.
Yeah,
So that part of it bothers me, right? But before we get into like the nitty gritty, because that sort of thing I think is the nitty gritty, where end times sensationalism can take the place of the stuff that actually matters. But even before that, I mentioned a moment ago that I was raised in kind of an environment, not my household per se, but just the Western American evangelical environment where end time sensationalism was very alive and well. For you guys, what was your first like exposure to end times stuff, end times teaching? Was it like a movie or a sermon? What did that what was the encounter like for you? And then what did that picture of like the end of the world thing do to you as a young person, as a kid?
A really good question. I don't think I have a time that I specifically remember. I definitely, I mean, we grew up in the same house. We went to the same churches as a kid. we went to the sort of evangelical style church as kids, and they talked about that stuff, you know.
Yep.
And so I always remember it being a thing. And, you know, I remember people, you know, it was always the same statements. It's like, any day now, the days are dark, any day, you know. And, but I never read, I already know where you could go with this, Nate, because you've read the books. What are the books? Come on. The
Oh,
books that everybody
Series.
the Left Behind.
left
Yeah,
behind
that was
series.
that was
Come
my
on.
first exposure to
I
this.
knew
Was
it
Left
would be.
Behind.
I knew it would be.
I read them as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I never read the books, you know, and so I didn't even know anything
But
about
did
them.
you watch the Nicolas Cage movie?
I did not. I try to avoid Nicolas Cage whenever I
Love it.
can, you know.
You should.
But
Get
so
out.
my exposure
Get
was
out.
only church.
Get
Yeah.
out!
This isn't for you.
I've not
You're
This is
too
a-
far gone.
This is a Nick Cage friendly zone.
Yeah, my only exposure would be through church, you know, in the church community, and adults that talked about it. And you know, there was always felt like no matter what church you go to, there's always one or two stinkers in the bunch who are, man, this is what they live for. They're not there for the actual stuff. They're there to tell you that the world is ending tomorrow. You know what I mean? So that was my exposure for sure, and I think that's probably what set the tone for me to have that sort of eye rolling. Yeah, okay, here we go. You know what I mean? Get it out, let it out, and then go home. You know. But anyways, yeah, that's my exposure, my experience.
Yeah, Tony, it was Left Behind for you.
Yeah, honestly, the idea of the rapture in and of itself definitely started with the Left Behind series. I read a lot as a kid, like a ton. And kind of connecting a little bit to my early churchhood experience or whatever. Like, I was definitely raised in a Christian family. Definitely went to church consistently. And, you know, just like everything else out there, there's pros and cons. And when you guys use the term evangelical, wow, I can't say that word accurately. That shows
Yeah.
how many times we used
It's
it.
fine. Yeah, it's fine.
But like our church was very much a very strong Bible-based believing Christianity type of thing is what they like to harp on. And the way that kind of translated, especially for a younger me, was, you know, there's the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Right? Like you don't ever talk about the Holy Spirit. You know, you talk about God, you talk about Jesus especially, but you don't talk about the weird stuff, right? You don't get too crazy, you don't get too excited. And so, you know, like I mentioned, there's pros and cons with that. Like, I definitely experienced a lot of cons. There is definitely a big part of my personal spiritual journey that needed a lot of what our church left out. It's very, very true. But at the same time, I see how they got where they were, right? How they got there. And it's because they really were responding to the extreme of what you would see in a Pentecostal church, I guess. Like people who rely a lot more on emotions and experience than anything else. Because in our church, man, if you were raising a hand when worship was happening, God, you were like a super Christian. Oh my gosh, look at that crazy Christian over there. And if you were raising two hands while church worship was happening, well then
Unhinged.
you're the pastor's wife, you know? And so that's totally how we were. And what's funny about that is I have no doubt about it that that's some of where my skepticism is built upon or has like a foundation from that. But I think that it wasn't until later in life when I really started to dig in deep and really focus on what I believe is discipleship. And I really started to recognize what you were saying, Nate, that so many times when talking about the end times, when the study of eschatology came up, 9 times out of 10, my mind just went to red flag of this is sensationalism that is pulling us away from the things that we should be focusing on. And does that mean that I have been guilty of throwing out a little bit of the baby with the bathwater when it comes to actual lessons in Revelations, for example? I have no doubt about it that's true because I steer away from those conversations as much as I can. I just don't think that they have value for what matters today. But like I said, it's a little bit of an extremist view.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, the baby out with the bathwater is that's a real
Yeah,
thing. It's a real
absolutely.
temptation because there's so much bathwater.
Yeah.
There's so much bathwater out there. It feels like the baby's very small sometimes, and the bathwater is there's a lot of it. Yeah, yes. For me, it wasn't like Left Behind was the first exposure I had. It was just stuff in the church and people talking about it. But Left Behind was like I was just old enough to be like able to read those things whenever they got super, super popular. And that like that is what defined, I feel like, the end times for an entire generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was probably like 8 maybe when those things got big. And it's like those things are like that's the dramatic picture, right? Planes are falling out of the sky, and cars are crashing everywhere, and people are vanished up into the clouds in this rapture. It's like very powerful imagery. It's very compelling. It's very interesting, right? It's very sci-fi. Um, and we ought to explore that in particular a little bit. Um, the topic of sensationalism, I think, is maybe one that even deserves a whole separate conversation.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
our tendency to be drawn to the sensational at the expense of the practical. Because Kanan, you mentioned the like it seems like in every like body of Christian believers, there's a couple stinkers who they show up when there's something to sensationalize, and then they disappear the moment you've got to like, okay, we're gonna show up at someone's house and provide some like physical labor help for them. And like they're never around for that stuff, but they're around if there's something cuckoo bananas to be talking about.
Yeah.
I think specifically, I've known some churches that had like what they considered, well, Tony, you mentioned your church like not wanting to talk about the Holy
Hmm.
Spirit or
Hmm.
God and God's presence having like any kind of physical effect on somebody,
Yeah.
right? Like miracles or speaking in tongues or any of these things that anyone who's been in church has probably, heard of or familiar with a little bit. It feels like there are some people that specifically will show up if that sort of thing might be happening. And then if it's not happening, they're like, okay, I'll,
Yeah, I
I'll
mean
I'll head over to the next church.
that's revival, right? I mean, if your church is a real church and real Christianity, then you're gonna experience revival. Let's bring
Yeah,
revival, right?
yeah, yeah. And it's not like so. Well, I think the end times are very much like that because it's so interesting and different, and it's like a mystery, and it's exciting, and it also carries with it the benefit of like everything ending. So nothing I do feels like it matters as much if everything's going to end immediately. So there's like I think there's something appealing about that to a lot of people. But as a kid, I could care less. Well, I guess it's not grammatically correct. I could not wait, I could care less. I couldn't care less. There it is. I could not care less about the Bible. Like you would never catch me reading the Bible as a kid.
Yeah,
But you know what you could catch me reading?
that book
This book I
series, right?
found, no, well, no, not even. Something much more interesting than that
Hmm.
in my little child mind. A book that I found in my parents' library called The Bible Code. The Bible Code.
Well, it's
And
so
somebody
secretive.
somebody had gone in and taken like actually a very valid Hebrew practice, which is this thing called gematria, where in the Hebrew language, Hebrew letters were also part of their numerical system. So every Hebrew letter also had a numerical value. And so there's like a very real thing that Hebrew authors would do, like in partnership with the Spirit of God as they're writing this book, in using numerical values of things to like tie threads together thematically and painting this big thematic picture of God interacting with people and stuff like that. That's a huge part of the Old Testament. And then there are certain parts of the New Testament. Greek letters aren't like that, but the authors of the Greek New Testament were mostly very Hebrew. And so you can find some of that stuff in the New Testament as well. But somebody went through and took the numerical value of like everything in the Bible. And then it was like, okay, this thing means like this word, and that means like this thing, and that means, bam, September 18th, 2021. That's the end of the world. And it says it right here because I took the numerical value of all these things. I cracked the code of the Bible. And the entire Bible is like all of these numbers that point to the end of the world. And they're like, okay, this number right here, this is about Russia. And this one says it's a Black Hawk helicopter. And this thing's just like nuclear. And somebody had gone through and just done a tremendous amount of like, look, all these numbers, and it points to this thing. And I think it actually means this thing. And it's this complex picture of the end of the world. And it's happening very, very soon. And it tells you exactly everything that's going to happen. And as a kid, that was just beyond interesting. The Bible was not interesting to me at all, but the code, like a secret code that was
Yeah.
underneath everything else, that is super, super interesting.
That totally makes sense. I mean, there's definitely that oh man, I can figure out something that no one else figure out, or I have this secret knowledge that other people don't have, you know? I can see the appeal there, especially like with what's happening in social media, you know? I also want a disclaimer that what for me personally, one of the biggest things that I have such a high disdain for is just abuse in the church or abuse done by the church to society or to individuals, right? And there's just so much of this topic that I feel like has fallen into that category, or in the past has, and in the future can't. Like, it can be an easy topic for a very charismatic leader to, whip up emotion and excitement and tap into what you're saying, Nate. That thing that is totally way more engaging and interesting than this dusty old piece of literature that, you have to be a scholar in order to spend a lot of time in order to actually understand, like for clout and for reputation and for any other type of thing that may make that person feel good about themselves as a religious leader. I don't know, but I've seen the damage that it's done to people. I've seen the damage that it's done to trying to have a normal conversation with someone who's outside of the Christian faith and trying to connect with them, but they automatically are categorizing you in the same category as someone like that, you know?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot about it that just makes me nervous. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah. However, at the same time as all of this, and we can talk about like this makes me a little uncomfortable, and this has been abused, and I think all of that is true. There's truth to all that, but the Revelation is in the Bible, and Matthew 24 is in the Bible. And 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 is in the Bible. And John 14, I think it's John 14. John 14 is in the Bible. And Daniel's in the Bible. So my question for you guys is what is the Bible actually doing? Like, what is the role of those books?
Well,
When I say, like, tell me about Revelation, is your thought like, I have no idea about Revelation? Or I don't want to, Tony, you mentioned earlier, I don't want to talk about Revelation. But it's like, what do you guys think that's doing there?
well, like a good Christian, I'd want to cherry pick the Bible and only pay attention to the things that I like, Nate. All right? I don't
that's
need
the
to
right
talk about
answer.
that.
I'll tell you guys right now. You want to know what I think of Revelation? I don't have a lot of thoughts. My head, I'm a simple man. You guys know me. I'm a simple man. I have trouble reading more than, say, a block of text bigger than 3 to 4 sentences at a time. Revelation, I don't even know. I don't even want to. I read it and it sounds interesting, but I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will raise my hand for sure, and not just Revelation, but just this topic as a whole. Like I said, this is definitely an area where I have no doubt about it. I have thrown the baby out with the bathwater because I do, like you said, Nate, it's funny but true. I think there's a lot of bathwater here, but I have scratched the surface a little bit that, there were some specific messages in Revelation, some specific groups of Christians in early churches that were being written to. And so I don't remember the specifics of that, but I have no doubt that it's in there for a reason. And if I was to challenge myself, I would force myself to make my way through the weeds to find the truth, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Maybe I should have
And that's
made
not
you do
easy.
that before we recorded this episode. You know what? Let's adjourn. Let's come back when Tony's finished reading all 22 chapters of Revelation,
There we
Yeah.
go.
and we and then once you actually let's come back once you've figured the whole thing out, so you can teach Kana and I what's going on.
All right, I'll see you guys in a couple of decades. Hopefully you're
Yeah,
dead by
right.
then.
Or yeah, we'll have been raptured long
Oh
before
yeah,
then,
yeah,
Tony.
my bad, my bad.
Uh-huh. Speaking of which, what do you guys think about the rapture?
And this is ignorance, is the rapture in and of itself in the Bible, in Revelation?
Mhm. Interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Tony,
Interesting.
some people would want you burned at the stake for such a question.
Let me raise my hand in a bit. I am such a heretic. Like that's me kind of joking and not joking. I am a Christian heretic, people.
Yeah. Well, I guess you missed the whole chapter in Revelation that's completely about the rapture, didn't you?
Totally.
No, I'm just kidding. It's not there. There there is nothing in Revelation about the rapture.
Mm.
There are, I mentioned Revelation and I mentioned Daniel, but I also said Matthew 24
Mm-hmm.
and I said 1 Thessalonians 4 and I said John 14. Those last three, which are like those three specific chapters, not just in like an entire book, those are where people get the idea of the rapture. Those ones. And maybe we can talk about those in a minute here, or maybe we'll run out of time and have to just do a whole episode of damage control about the rapture after this one. But with like, have either of you guys read like, well, okay, Kanan, you just mentioned you had read some of Revelation. If you had to be like, wow, how do I word this? If you had to describe what you think those books are doing, because Daniel does a lot of the same stuff that Revelation is doing, and a lot of even the language is the same, very similar symbolism and poetry and that sort of thing. What do you think those are doing there? So much of the Bible lends itself to being taken and like doing something with it, right? So much
Yeah, that's a
of
really
the
good
Bible,
question.
like you can grab hold of it and do something.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to grab hold of?
That's a great question. I wish I could give it more justice than you want me to give it, but I'm not gonna do a good job of this at all. It's been many moons since I've read through Revelation. In fact, the times I've tried, I typically open it up and I read, say like I don't know, a couple 6, 7 verses, and then my eyes glaze over and I'm like, I don't know how to interpret this. I don't know how to look at this and get anything of value out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you at all for that. Honestly, I don't blame you at all for that. Uh, Reading Genesis chapter 1 can be beefy. Reading John chapter 1 can be beefy. Revelation and Daniel, I think, I've heard them referred to as the deep ends of the pool. So, like, learning how to swim in general
Yeah.
is a challenge,
Yeah.
right? The deep end, or you can think of like whitewater rapids. Learning how to not drown in like tumultuous water is a lot more difficult even than just learning how to swim or stay afloat in the ocean. If the Bible is an ocean, and I don't think it's a bad analogy, then the deep end or the harsher end are the ones that take all of the imagery and symbolism and threads from the rest of it and then tie them all together into one giant, I won't say knot, I'll say tapestry. And I think that's very, very much what Daniel is. And it's very, very much what Revelation is. It's kind of like if you don't know all the rest of the Bible pretty well, you're not going to have any idea
Mm.
what's going on in these books.
That's interesting. So it's like a bookend essentially. What I'm understanding, it references so many different things that it's almost like a summary. Is that what you would say? A
Oh, let's see. I
complicated
don't know if I'd
summary.
call it a summary. It's okay. It's actually fascinating. The word revelation. If you had to define what the word revelation means, what would you say?
To discover information, right? To reveal something that was hidden.
Yep, yep. The Greek word that revelation is, and by the way, it's revelation, not
Uh-huh.
shuns.
Oh, there we
We
go.
go revelations. It's just the revelation of John,
Yeah.
or the revelation that was given to John,
And see, the
is
historical
basically what we
context
get.
is so interesting to me. So I really like this direction. Let's keep going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Greek word there is, and this one should ring some bells for both
Probably.
of you guys. The Greek word is apocalypsis.
Oh.
So you guys are both familiar with the phrase apocalypse,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, apocalypse. If I asked you to define the word apocalypse, what would you say?
Huh. Well, I mean, it is
Big bad
synonymous.
event.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
right? With that.
The end of all things. Yeah,
But I
totally.
also go to the root word that I probably can't pronounce correct. Oh, the apocalypta. Ugh, the collection of books that aren't included. You know,
Oh,
I
oh, Tony, almost. It's apocrypha.
apocrypha.
Apocrypha. Yeah, different. Yeah,
Two
different
different.
different words.
Okay, perfect. That's how my
Yeah,
brain
but
works.
yeah, they're very close. Yeah, they're honestly very close words. Yes, apocalypsis or like apocalypse. Really, you could translate Revelation the apocalypse of John, but we immediately think, and I'm right there with you, Kanan. When you think of the word apocalypse, it sounds like a cataclysmic event
Yeah, the
that
destruction
results
of
in the end of
John.
everything. Yeah, apocalypse now, right? Wasn't that a Mel Gibson movie? Was it? Hold on, wait. Apocalypse Now. Oh no, it's Apocalypto. Yeah,
The one with
Apocalypto is a
the
Mel Gibson movie.
Aztecs or the Mayans or something.
There's
That's pretty
another one
good.
called Apocalypse Now.
Yes, that's the war one.
Yeah, so Apocalypse definitely has that connotation of like the end of everything. Interestingly enough, the word in Greek means like an event of unveiling.
Huh.
So it's this, the word gives a sense of something is obscured, something's hidden, and then you pull the sheet back. You pull the curtain back, and now you can see it.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
That's what it means. So it's actually an entire like genre of literature in the Bible, apocalyptic literature. So it doesn't mean literature about like the end of everything necessarily. It means literature that specifically is revealing something or showing something that was unseen or obscured before that point. So the translation, the revelation of John, actually makes a lot of sense. Like
Mm,
it's a very good translation.
yeah, the revealing
Hmm.
of something hidden and that
Hmm.
that John sees and is trying to communicate to others.
Yeah. Yep. So I'll just kind of like I'll dive in here a little bit about we'll dice it up about what the role of these books are
Yes, please
because
do.
Daniel does the same thing sort of. Daniel's like a mixed bag. Probably if I asked you what you know about Daniel, you guys would be like, okay, there's the Daniel diet,
Yeah.
the Daniel cleanse. That's a thing.
I mean, prophecies.
There's
I think of prophecies with
Yeah,
Daniel.
there's prophecies in there. There's
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Which I love that. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can pull from
Hmm.
there.
There's Daniel in the lion's den,
Hmm.
right? Those are the ones that show up in like Sunday school type stories, and they're all pretty awesome. And it's those first like 7 chapters of Daniel that have all of those stories in them, and then it's chapter 8 through 12 that's written like Revelation, like it is dreams and it's wild symbolism about like statues and like totems and multiple beasts, and they're getting torn down, and there's the Son of Man coming upon the clouds and all that stuff. And it's very much like apocalyptic literature. For sure. It's very much in that same. If you read those last handful of chapters of Daniel and you read Revelation, you're like, okay, this is almost the same thing. They're very, very, very similar. Question: Who was Daniel written to?
My understanding is the historical context at that point, the Jewish people were subjugated, they were captured, and Daniel was basically honored as like an advisor role to the conquering king. And so my assumption is that the actual book of Daniel was written to like his people, the Jewish people, for encouragement in exile.
Nice. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. This is the you guys are both familiar with like the big Babylonian exile, right? This is the southern kingdom. This is after the kingdom of Israel is split into northern and southern kingdoms. And the northern kingdom has ceased to exist for some time now. They got dragged off by Assyria, and they're no more. And the southern kingdom lasted for a few more generations, but they're doing their own thing for the most part. They're rebelling against God. They're making all these alliances with other nations and then betraying the other nations and like getting basically they get what's coming to them when Babylon goes, oh, okay, you want to make an alliance with me and betray me? How about I tear your walls down and your temple and drag you off into captivity? So that's what happens. And it had been something God had been warning about for quite a long time. That's where like the events of Daniel happen. Daniel's one of like an earlier group that's taken to Babylon, and then all those events happen. And basically, those last handful of chapters of Daniel, there's all of these images, and there's these images and symbolism of like beasts and monsters and like whatever else, and they're all like one by one they like rise up, and one by one they get toppled, like one after the other. And Daniel's like, what the heck does this mean? And when is the exile going to end? And when are the people going to come back home? And he basically like comes to the conclusion and is told that these statues and these beasts are representative of human kingdoms. So Babylon, maybe, or Persia, maybe, because they're the kingdom that shows up after Babylon, or Greece and like Alexander the Great because they show up later, or Rome, and so on and so forth. These different kingdoms that all kind of look the same. In the biblical mindset and these like dreams that Daniel's having about this, they're different, but they're the same. They're all monsters. They're like wild, violent beasts that are in rebellion against God, and one by one they get toppled. So in that sense, with that very like limited explanation, for the Jewish people in Babylonian captivity, but then after that they're in Persian captivity, and after that, with some like, with a little break in between, they're in captivity by the Seleucid Greek Empire. And then after that, they're in captivity by the Roman Empire. And it's like one thing after the other with like a brief stint of being their own kingdom, and they self-destruct. Taking all that in a bubble, what would those visions that Daniel had, like how would they be useful to the people they're being written to, like in the generations after Daniel?
What are your thoughts, Ken?
Dude, I'm having trouble keeping up. I'm not gonna lie to you. Tony, I was like, you answered the question about Daniel earlier, and I was like, thank God Tony's here.
It's okay.
This podcast would be a one-man show.
So if you're listening to this and if you're having trouble keeping up, it's all right. Kanan is representing you.
This is the character that I play. It's not real life, guys. I'm actually much smarter than I'm playing off.
Yep, that's why we pay him the big bucks.
Yeah, so the question of the analogies or the prophecies or the imagery. Ugh. So we also bring you on
Relevation.
because you can actually speak, Kanan. I can't speak.
I can say the words. I just can't do any actual thinking. Is the problem.
What purpose did they serve? Well, when you were describing that, Nate, and you were describing, the Jewish people, having to go through one conquering people after another, after another, after another, it threw my mind to, like the days of Jesus and like the typical, what I would imagine, the typical Jewish mindset of what they were expecting when it came to the Messiah that they were waiting for, that look, we have not been our own people for generation after generation after generation for hundreds and hundreds of years, and there will come a Jewish king. We will have our Jewish king that we've always wanted, that will conquer the conquerors, who will free us from enslavement. And so that's kind of where my mind goes, and I kind of feel like, like with the images of these great beasts coming up and getting knocked down, it seems like it may be foreshadowing for their expected Messiah. But I could be connecting the dots wrong there.
Well, I think it's a really good point, because it's in Daniel where you read about that Son of Man figure, and like this figure who's in the image of a human at the right hand of God, as God tears down these like violent human kingdoms, these violent beasts, one after the other. And then Jesus, you guys know, Jesus talks about how like I am like the Son of Man, but also the Son of God. He uses both of those phrases to describe himself. But I'll frame it this way: these lines from Daniel, they've been debated for a very, very long time, obviously, because it's talking about human kingdoms that are rising and falling, right? And so people have tried to be like, what kingdoms do those beasts represent? Exactly, like what is being talked about?
Like a one for one type of thing.
Like a one for one kind of thing. Like, is it Babylon? Is it Rome? And then in the like years and years later, and these other scenarios where like the Israelites or even Christians have been like oppressed by a people group, they'll be like, is this the beast that was talked about in Daniel? Is this like is the Third Reich in Germany? Is it one of the beasts that was talked about in Daniel? Is Soviet Russia one of the beasts that was talked about in Daniel? And so, in other words, like there's multiple different ways you can interpret this, and people have debated it back and forth for a long, long time. But what I'll suggest is, and this is where why I brought this up to begin with, like, what is the purpose of Daniel? What is the purpose of Revelation? If all the rest of the Bible is meant to be grabbed hold of and applied, like for something to be done with it, what is the purpose of these things that seem to give this sense of like of the end of an age or the end of an era? And simply put, these beasts in Daniel, these violent human kingdom beasts, does it represent Babylon? Yes, clearly. Does it represent the Seleucid Greek Empire, which like the abomination of desolation, like that kind of thing? Yes, clearly it does. Does it represent Rome? Yeah, it clearly did. Does it represent these kingdoms, like these human governments, like much later in the future, that do the same sort of thing in a different way that these previous kingdoms did, like elevating violence and power and money and propaganda to the highest place of the state? Yes, I mean, we have different forms now for how that looks like, but human kingdoms do what human kingdoms do, right? Like,
Yeah.
we end up like exalting the same things that we've always exalted. There's nothing new under the sun in that sense. So what Daniel does for the people of that day is it gives them this way to view their current situation, which is essentially human kingdoms always end up looking this way. They end up looking like violent beasts, but always they'll be overthrown by God and those who ally themselves with them. Always they'll topple in the same way. So the people in the Babylonian exile, they held on to these words as like, we don't know when this is going to end, but we do know how it's going to end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it was the same thing when they were under the Persian Empire. We don't know when this is going to end, but we do know how it's going to end because God unveiled it for us. He gave us the apocalypse of how he works in history. These kingdoms rise, and they seem like they are conquering, but always they fall. The Jews held this like tightly during the Seleucid Greek Empire, when like hundreds of thousands of them were genocided for following Judaism. They held this tightly during the Roman oppression. The Jews during the Holocaust held on to the words of Daniel for the exact same thing. So it was an unveiling, not so much about exactly like this is exactly what's going to happen. Here are the details of the event for the future. It was an unveiling of God's purposes through history In other words, it was like pulling back the curtain on the heavenly perspective
Yeah.
of history. Um, was it meant to give them hope? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was it meant to give them endurance? Absolutely. Was it meant to give them a timetable for the future? Not necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all that said, why are we talking about Daniel? No one talks about Daniel all that much.
Yeah, but Revelation's
because
the same.
because Daniel and Revelation are two peas in a pod, man.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys this. Was Revelation written to anyone in particular?
I want to say yes, but I don't know.
I have
Cam,
no
do you have any
clue.
idea?
I have no clue.
All right. Let me tell you. And this is a gimme, because you can just open up the first page of Revelation right at the beginning. And John's like, "Hello, I'm John. I am writing about a vision God gave me, and here's who I'm writing it to."
Gotcha.
And he lists out 7 churches.
See, yeah, I was thinking the churches that I mentioned earlier, but yeah, I wasn't
Mhm.
sure.
I
Yep.
knew that actually. Now that we've made it here, I knew that was an easy question to get into
I
that.
knew you guys both knew it. You both heard it before, but it's like honestly, if someone asked me that, I'd be like, I'm not sure. But it's some of them you've heard of before: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Ephesus is probably the one that really pops up. Also, Philadelphia,
Yeah, the Ephesians.
not the one you're thinking of, but the city of brotherly love. That's what we named our Philadelphia after.
Yeah.
So it's 7 churches that John writes this letter to. Is it literally just about those 7? I talked about the significance of numbers in the Jewish mindset earlier, and 7 is what do you call a word that's spelled the same as another word but has a different meaning?
Homonym?
Monopoeia.
Yeah, homonym. Bark. Rough. Yeah. Homonym. The Hebrew word for 7 is a homonym for the Hebrew word for like complete or fulfilled. So they'll use the number 7, and John especially. Next time you guys read the Gospel of John or Revelation, if you ever do, just pay attention to the numbers, because John loves using numbers to make a point.
Yeah.
Especially the number 7.
It's like a
But he-
religious pun, basically.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then you're like, wait a minute, what does that mean about Genesis 1? And we'll save that one for another podcast, everybody. But yeah, John writes to 7 churches, but it's like this picture of writing to the church of that day. And he tells them right at the beginning, like he fills us in on what their situation was. They're being persecuted, like actively, by the Roman Empire. They're under persecution. Some of them are losing their jobs, their livelihood. Some of them are losing their lives for following Jesus. So it's active persecution. So there's a situation. And then John also fills us in on what the response is in those churches to that current situation. Some of them are like holding fast to their faith in Jesus and dying for it, suffering immensely or dying. Some of them are like fading into the background and like, well, if I suffer when I mention Jesus, maybe I'll just not mention Jesus anymore, and I'll keep that private and then keep the rest of my life over here. So that was happening. And then some others are actually becoming very, what John said is lukewarm. They're making compromises to fit in with culture and pursuing what the Roman Empire valued, which is money and wealth and authority and power. So you have like multiple different responses that the church is going through in response to all of this persecution. And then John goes, I have a vision for you. I want to tell you something. Like, there's the situation, like the very direct situation he's writing to. So he's already told us, like, this is who I'm writing to, and this is why I'm writing it to you. So who's it for, first of all?
Yeah, it's going to be for all the churches, all Christians, basically.
Yeah, like, and in what time is it for? Is it for them, or is it for us?
Just like in Daniel, it's both, right? He's trying to
yes.
provide encouragement to what they're going through in the early church and the persecution, but it's a consistent reminder that, hey, no matter how many idols get set up, they're going to get knocked down.
Yeah. Yes. Tony, I think you're dead on that this is a letter that is written to them, and it's for them in their exact situation. But you remember how I mentioned in Daniel that there's nothing new under the sun? And how the like cycle of history of like rebellious human history tends to end up looking the same one way or the other? If you had to guess what kind of things you would find in this letter full of visions that John got from God in writing to a church that's undergoing, like presently in that time, was undergoing persecution, physical, violent persecution from a extremely powerful human kingdom. What kind of things would you guess you would find in this book?
I think it's a lot of encouragement, you know, kind of helping them with perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Like that. If I was in that situation, that's what I would need, right? I would need like something to hold on to and something to encourage me to keep going forward. That's what Daniel did in his book, right? That's what the visions did for Daniel and for his people in those times and for the times in history afterward. Would you guys agree?
Would.
Are you following?
Yes.
Am I spinning my wheels?
No,
Yeah.
this is good. This is really good.
So in other words, if Daniel, would you agree that Daniel and his visions provided encouragement and hope for the people of his day and for the generations afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Because, I mean, they were being suppressed, and the Jewish people continued to experience suppression over and over again, like you said, all the way to
Yeah.
the Holocaust. And same
Yeah.
thing with the early church, dealing with Romans and beyond.
Yeah. If that's the case, what would you guess? What kind of imagery and symbolism would you guess you might find in Revelation?
So is he calling back to basically the same imagery and symbols that Daniel used, because it's what the Jewish people knew and were familiar with, and applying it to today and not just back in Daniel's time?
Yeah, would you be surprised if I told you that you'd find a lot of imagery about beasts
Yeah.
representing human kingdoms?
No, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense now. Yeah.
Would you be surprised if you had all of this imagery of like warfare and fighting between God's people and these violent human kingdoms?
Yeah.
Would you be surprised? Would you be surprised if I told you that every single one of these visions ends with those violent beasts being put down and resulting in defeat?
Oh man, I don't know about you, Cannon. This is super eye-opening to me, and I think this is great.
Well, so here's where it gets crazy, because like does John want to be like, all right, there's going to be this big battle, and I want you guys to get ready with physical swords and to physically fight against Rome? Do you think that's John or like God's goal in that whole idea?
Definitely not. But there's so many Jewish people who interpreted it that way, and there are so many Christians today that interpret Revelations in a very external way, right?
That's right. And so here's where it gets super interesting for me. John, there's this consistent motif of John hearing one like announcement of the coming of this thing that you're expecting. You know, Tony, you mentioned how the Jews were expecting their messianic king to
Yeah.
be like violent in the David-like sense, like he'd be conquering in a David-like sense. So the suffering servant Messiah that they got was like insulting
Yeah,
to them.
absolutely. Yeah.
So John has this moment where it's like he hears this announcement. Here comes the Lion of Judah. Here comes the conquering king. And it's like the Lion of Judah, that's language all the way from the end of the book of Genesis. But like that's messianic language as well. Like the lion, like a lion like tears the enemies apart. So you're like, okay, here we go. Here's going to come the Lion of Judah is going to tear these violent beasts to pieces. This is what you're expecting. John hears that, but then he turns and he looks, and what he sees is instead of a lion, he sees a lamb.
Oh man.
And the lamb's throat is slit, and there's its own blood running down it.
Huh.
So he hears this, but he sees that. And then as the book continues, and as this conflict like increases in intensity, and like we're leading up to this big moment, this battle between God's people and the people of the Messiah, and then these violent human kingdoms, John hears like, here comes the marching of the armies of the Lord, and he hears the trumpets, and you're like, holy cow, they're coming. That's what he hears.
Yeah.
These are the ones who are going to fight the beast.
Yeah.
And he turns and he looks, and what he sees is he sees the lamb again, but it's leading this massive army of people who are covered in the blood of the lamb. Like they're wearing white, but they're soaked in the blood, and they're not carrying weapons. They're singing and they're praising the lamb. Like that is the army that goes into battle. And then you're like, what in the world? What's going to happen? Like one of these armies is ready for battle, and the other of these armies is led by like this sacrificial lamb thing. And then the battle ends inexplicably with all of the beasts being thrown into like defeat, being crushed, and ultimately coming to nothing. So is there more to John? Yes. Yeah, there's way, way more to John than what excuse me. Is there more to Revelation? Yeah, there's way more to Revelation than what I'm talking about. But the base of Revelation is written to a people in that generation who are being persecuted and oppressed and crushed by a violent human kingdom, very similarly to what's happening in Daniel's time.
Yeah.
And how are they going to respond? Are they going to continue in faithfulness? Are they going to lose their fervor and like meld in with the rest of society? And what John says, or like this vision that John gets in his book, is this same kind of unveiling of the massive perspective of history that you get in the book of Daniel, where from Daniel, you see again and again, yes, these violent human kingdoms are beast-like, but one by one, inevitably, they fall in the same way.
Yeah.
So God is faithful, and that will happen. Revelation does the exact same thing, but even takes it a step further, because not only do you see the beasts rising up in the same way and falling in the same way, you actually see what our role is in the whole thing. Like those 7 churches and the people in that first century context, but also for every generation of people who are being crushed and oppressed by a violent human kingdom, as so many of us are today. Another beast in another time. What is our role? Our role is to follow in the footsteps of the suffering servant, the Lamb of God. Like our role is not to fight against flesh and blood. Our role is to walk in the footsteps of our Messiah. And that is ultimately, in the perspective of Revelation, that is how these kingdoms get defeated.
Yeah.
And like John is like, he's not even nuanced with it. He straight up calls these beasts, like refers to these beasts in the same language that Daniel does. He literally has this moment where there's this woman who's riding the beast, and the woman's name is Lady Babylon, but she's also Rome. And you're like, oh, it's Babylon? Oh, no, it's not Babylon. Oh, it's Rome? Oh, it's about Nero? Oh, no, it's about Nebuchadnezzar. And you're like, yes, it's
all
about,
of them.
it's about all of them.
Yeah.
Because it's about none of them. Like it's about the idea.
It's the big
that
picture.
over and over again. Yeah, that's right. Human rebellion looks the same way repeatedly, again and again and again. And it oppresses and it crushes and it takes advantage. But is there hope to hold on to? Yes, there absolutely is. Because they're always going to end in the same way. Is there an encouragement to our role and our action? Revelation turns that up to 11, where we are called to walk in the footsteps of the slain Lamb of God for the sins of the world. How is the beast defeated? The beast is ultimately defeated by our self-sacrificial actions as we follow in the footsteps of the Lamb. So there's more. And this is where we're like out of time. And I'm like, no, there's so much more here.
Yeah.
Because Revelation, I talked about how it ties together all those threads. There's way more threads Revelation ties together, because after the conflict, there's what comes next. There's like, not only are there the beasts that we're in conflict with, there's a serpent, there's a dragon that is the empowering force behind all of these beasts, the same serpent from Genesis 3. And then there's an ultimate conflict there. That's not about the details, but more about where all of history is heading. And then Revelation finally gives us a picture of when this era is over, what has God been working toward the entire time? So I think that's where we have to pause.
Yeah.
And say we're out of time. Because that part deserves a whole episode.
Yeah.
And then also getting into the rapture, I think probably deserves another episode. So we're probably set up for a couple follow-ups here.
Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating. I think what, gosh, just the picture that you're painting, that Revelation is painting, when John hears one thing, and maybe he's thinking it, and maybe we the readers, and definitely the Jewish people, and a lot of Christians, we hear an army coming, and we turn and we look, and we're expecting us to be there, clad in all this armor and swords and weaponry, ready to fight the enemy in a very physical, violent way, because of course God's army is the strongest. But just what you're describing, like how it's not like that at all. It's so the world turned upside on its head. That's the message of Jesus right there, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the Messiah. That wasn't the conquering king that the Jews were expecting. And then for me personally, if you guys are listening to this, and if you've heard a little bit of what's going on in social media, and if you're on one side of the spectrum versus another, maybe you're like Kanan and you're definitely very interested in what the end times looks like. Maybe you're on my side where you're definitely very skeptical. I think what you're illuminating here for us, this is such a great picture of the baby that is in the bathwater. And I definitely encourage anyone to please join us for our next couple of episodes, because I think this is fascinating. This has definitely driven my interest in the historical context and understanding the big picture that Revelation in Daniel is trying to show us through the roof. Like, this is very fascinating to me. So thank you, Nate, for
I was
for
hoping the world.
revealing this to us, illuminating
Good
it.
one.
Apocalypse.
World was gonna end tomorrow, but
Yeah, well, if it ends tomorrow, we'll be your
It's still
guides
good.
to the
still
afterlife.
good.
Still good. This episode may never go live. It might just
You
have
never
been-
know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Kanan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, you know what, final thought for me, I mean, it's funny because my Bible reading has never been very good at going through one book at a time from beginning to end. And, even though that's something I've learned in the past, that's very important. And it's funny because, with Daniel, I feel like having the historical context is very, very key. But with Revelation, all you need to do is read the thing from beginning to end, and it's a lot more clear. You know what I mean? At the very least, and still the historical context helps, right? But just becomes a lot more clear. And piecemealing things is tend to how I digest the Bible, and it's not always the best way to do it, I don't think.
Yeah,
So
very
anyway, it's
true.
just something that struck me was just read it from beginning to end. Get the big picture before
Yeah.
you start making
Chew-
judgments and
Chew on
assumptions.
the meat for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. I think normally this is at the point of the episode where we'd be like, all right, let's what's the easy approach here? How do we take this complicated thing and boil it down? But I kind of feel like we did just enough to set ourselves up to go into all of the most practical things in the next couple follow-ups.
Yeah,
Like this is
I
kind of
agree.
the base. And I mentioned before, like I mentioned the rapture earlier. We didn't get to go into those things. We got to go in.
Yeah.
I gave you guys like the base of Revelation and Daniel, but there's more. Like there's definitely more. So I'm excited to
Yeah.
go into those things. But I'll say if we can take a one-liner from this whole thing, I think the role of Daniel and the role of Revelation and the role of the Bible in general is not to be a tool that allows us to predict the headlines of next week or tomorrow. Rather, I think we're invited to read it for wisdom on how to live faithfully today. And I think that wisdom is timeless.
Yes.
We're not given an invitation on how to welcome in. Here's how to decode the future. We're called to be transformed in the present, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So with that said, that'll have to do for now.
Yeah.
We're plumb out of time. And to all you guys, thanks for joining us for this. Tony and Kanan, thank you both for hopping in. I spoke way more
No,
than
man.
I
This is
ever want to
fantastic.
speak in an episode like this. But here we are. That's where we came from and what we did. So you all, join us next time for more diving into the weird the weird world of end times literature, apocalyptic literature in the Bible.
Yeah.
And as always, y'all take it easy.
Take it easy.